The Dragon Knight. As a dragon, my daily routine consists of 3 things. Wake up, eat, clock in for work. My job, every single day, is to beat back the brave warriors who come to challenge me. If a challenger gets knocked out instantly, lunch is just a sad sandwich. If the fight goes back and forth for a while, I get to add a drumstick. If I nearly die before pulling off a comeback victory, dinner becomes a 5-star feast. Welcome to the hottest tourist attraction on the continent, Dragon Slayer Adventure Park. Pay the steep entrance fee and you earn the right to challenge the world's last living dragon. If you value your life, you can also purchase tickets for yourself and your family to sit in the absolutely safe spectator stands and cheer for my flames and claws. Children under 4 feet tall get in free. This show has been running for 5 solid years. And I have been waiting, desperately, for the arrival of my Dragon Slayer. Everett, where in the world are you now? The first time I met Everett, I was still just an egg. Probably out of curiosity, he brought me home and placed me next to the bellows of his father's forge to keep warm. A month later, I finally cracked through my shell and saw the world for the very first time. "Huh, you kind of look like a pig," he said, his expression a mix of disappointment and genuine delight. I couldn't really blame him. Young dragons do look remarkably like pigs before their first molting. From now on, I'm going to call you Snort. I'm Everett, and I'm your best friend, okay? Everett was a blacksmith's son. His father made a living shoeing horses and forging farm tools. The family of 3 wasn't wealthy, but they got by just fine. After Everett started keeping me, though, food became a bit tight. His mother was always complaining, "That pig of yours eats more than our horse." To keep her from complaining, I made sure to swallow anything remotely edible whenever I was outside. A few times I nearly died from eating something strange or got mistaken for a crop-destroying pest. If Everett hadn't protected me, I probably never would have gotten the chance to become a real dragon. Everett's friends always teased him for keeping a pig as a pet. Unable to take the mockery, Everett got into fights with them constantly. He might have been small, but he was a blacksmith's son, strong as an ox. "You'd better not look down on me," he'd declare, "because I'm going to become a Dragon Knight." The Dragon Knight was every child's favorite story. Legend told of a warrior in a distant kingdom who bathed in the waters of the river Styx and became immortal. He braved countless perils, obtained the legendary Dragon Slayer sword and silver armor, and ultimately defeated an evil dragon that had seized a castle, rescuing the princess it held captive and marrying her. Everett idolized the Dragon Knight more than any other kid. He begged his father to forge him a practice sword, unsharpened of course. He convinced a retired knight in the village to teach him horsemanship and swordsmanship, and he practiced day and night. But as Everett grew older and started school, his teacher delivered crushing news. Dragons had vanished from the world long ago. The evil dragon that once terrorized castles, that was ancient history. Nothing but legend. Snort, if there are no more dragons in this world, what's the point of becoming a Dragon Knight? Everett was devastated. Watching my best friend sink into despair, I grew anxious too, so anxious I could barely eat. I wandered along the riverbank, studying my reflection in the water. I only had a pair of ugly wings at that point, but my skin was hardening, and bumps were starting to form where horns would eventually grow. The village kids had started calling me Flying Pig. Wait, I was a dragon! If I could become an evil dragon, then Everett's dream wouldn't be meaningless after all. That night, I packed a sack of my favorite apples and slipped away under the moonlight, because I was going to find the last evil dragon in the world. Far to the east lies a place called Obsidian Valley. They say the world's last dragon, Lunaris, makes its home there. Dragons live for a very long time. I was certain that old dragons still dwelled in Obsidian Valley. So I set off toward the rising sun. The apples ran out quickly, and I was terrible at hunting. I could chase a rabbit for half a day and still come up empty. When hunger gnawed at my belly, I thought of Everett. He always snuck into the village orchard to steal apples for me. Turns out, rain is a pretty regular occurrence too. When I couldn't find shelter, I'd squeeze into mouse holes or snake dens, huddling with the trembling creatures through the night. After more than 200 days of travel, I finally reached Obsidian Valley, an active volcano, where bubbling lava pooled everywhere. The dragon named Lunaris lived at the volcano's heart, soaking in the molten rock and snoring contentedly. Hello, I want to learn how to become a legendary evil dragon. What's your name, little one? Where did you come from? Lunaris opened its enormous eyes and studied me. My name is Snort. Snort? That's not exactly a name fit for an evil dragon. Lunaris burst out laughing. Tell me, little one, why do you want to become an evil dragon? Once you do, foolish heroes will come knocking around the clock. Better to find a hidden valley like this one and live in peace. I'm sorry, but I have a reason I absolutely must become one. Is that so? Lunaris fell into thought. I can help you. But first, you need to grow up. And so Lunaris became my mentor. The old dragon taught me that dragons must eat rocks and minerals. Apples alone wouldn't make me grow. As an evil dragon, it would be pretty embarrassing if you couldn't breathe fire. Lunaris pointed to some foul-smelling rocks reeking of sulfur. That's saltite ore. Swallow it and you'll be able to breathe fire. I started searching the volcano for saltite every day. The taste was absolutely vile. Every time I choked down a chunk, I had to gulp mouthfuls of water to wash it down. Evil dragons have armor-like scales that blades can't pierce. If you die too easily, you'll never become legendary, Lunaris told me. I began grinding my scales against razor-sharp obsidian. The scales that grew after my first molt were tiny, and the jagged edges of the rock scraped many of them off, exposing raw, stinging flesh. It hurt so much I couldn't stop whimpering. Your teeth and tail are a dragon's most powerful weapons. When heroes come bothering you, don't hesitate. Bite their swords in half and shatter their shields with your tail. Every day I trained in the forest. At first, I could only leave tooth marks on saplings as thick as my wrist. Eventually, I could snap through ancient trees as wide as a barrel. Dragons grow at an astonishing rate. Though I was only 7 years old, I had grown dozens of times larger. I missed the days when Everett and I used to lie together in the hay. I wondered how Everett was doing now. In a cave on the volcano, I completed my final molt and grew the magnificent paired wings that dragons are so proud of. With these wings, I could fly to any corner of the world in a single day. The world is vast for humans, but small for dragons. Lunaris always said that. Now I finally understood. For an evil dragon, reputation is everything. Lunaris chose a town for my target. At midnight, I landed on the town hall, spread my massive wings, and breathed a few symbolic flames. The garrison cavalry fled immediately. The mayor didn't escape in time. He wet himself rather pathetically. Gee, great dragon, please spare my life. We'll give you all our gold and silver. Gold and silver? What was I supposed to do with that? I jabbed a claw menacingly at his chest. Hand over all your apples. The mayor was completely baffled. I raided several more towns using the same approach, but not a single hero showed up to challenge me. I was frustrated. Why? Lunaris looked at the growing mountain of apples and sighed. If you don't steal some gold, what knight is going to bother fighting you? Humans don't risk their lives for honor alone. They're driven by greed. But gold isn't even edible, and it's heavy to carry around. Lunaris covered its face with a claw, clearly exasperated. Fine. At the very least, you should kidnap a beautiful princess. That should bring plenty of knights running. Taking Lunaris's advice, that very night I flew to the royal capital and carried off a princess from the castle's highest tower. But when Lunaris saw her, it immediately shook its head. This princess won't do. Why not? She's too heavy. The princess overheard our conversation and threw a fit, kicking and punching. I had to rush her back home. I visited several other kingdoms. Lunaris had impossibly high standards for human beauty. Every princess I brought back was rejected with barely a glance. Crooked nose, too flat-chested, terrible acne, generic cosmetic surgery face. One by one, the disappointed princesses returned home. Stories of the kidnapped princesses and the picky dragons spread far and wide. People began to whisper that only a princess chosen by the dragon could truly be called beautiful. Soon, kingdoms started sending envoys with invitations, welcoming the dragon to kidnap their princesses and prove they were the most beautiful in the world. Whenever I arrived at a castle, they'd strike up the band, fire celebratory cannons, and the king himself would place his elegantly dressed daughter on my back. The whole kingdom would celebrate like it was a holiday. Yet, Lunaris never gave approval. The princess hunt was driving me crazy. Lunaris was equally frustrated, reminiscing about how easy it was to find a beautiful princess centuries ago. But modern princesses either smeared too much makeup on their faces or padded their chests with too much silicone. Compared to dragons, princesses might actually pose a greater threat to knights. While I was busy princess hunting, something else happened. One night, as I rested in a wilderness, I caught the scent of a human weak, barely clinging to life. I followed the scent and found a little girl collapsed in the tall grass. She looked terribly frail. I hurried to uproot an apple tree from a nearby forest and squeezed the juice into her mouth, one apple at a time. Some color returned to her cheeks. I cradled her in my arms and flew back to the volcano. "Lunaris, this girl is dying. Please save her." Lunaris sighed, its eyes telling me I was being foolish. But it bent down to examine the girl. "She has consumption, an illness humans can never cure. That's why her parents left her in that wasteland to die." I was heartbroken. Was I supposed to just watch this girl die? I said it's an illness humans can never cure. But for dragons, it's a different story. What do I need to do? "Dragon tears can heal any disease," Lunaris said softly. "But we rarely do this. Dragons are proud creatures." I immediately lowered my head to the girl's chest and let my tears fall onto her. Color flooded back into her face, and her breathing steadied. For a while after that, I paused my princess hunting to help Lunaris care for the girl. She recovered beautifully and was soon able to walk on her own. I discovered the girl couldn't speak. She could only make sounds like ee to express herself. So I named her Ivy. Ivy and I grew very close. She wasn't the least bit afraid of my massive body or rough scales. She loved to wrap her arms around my neck, ride on my back while munching apples, or fall asleep nestled against my wings. Lunaris often remarked on Ivy's beauty. If this girl had been born into royalty, she'd be the most beautiful princess in the world. What a shame. Can't we just pretend she's a princess? Do you have any money? Without treasure, who's going to challenge you? Lunaris urged me to hurry. If you wait much longer, your human friend will become an old man. For dragons, human lives are like candle flames, brief and fleeting. I panicked. If Everett became an old man, he couldn't marry a princess even if he defeated me. On Lunaris's recommendation, I flew to Ashford Castle in the south, where a princess of legendary beauty was said to reside. The king was thrilled to hear I'd come to kidnap his daughter. He threw an extravagant banquet in my honor. Noble dragon. May I ask your esteemed name? Snort definitely wouldn't cut it. I needed a fearsome dragon name. My name is Hexadorian. Honored Hexadorian, I shall have every musician and bard in the kingdom compose epic ballads in your glory. If you can ensure my beautiful daughter finds a worthy suitor, I will build you a temple and engrave your likeness on our highest denomination gold coins. I scratched my head awkwardly. If the king knew I planned to marry his daughter off to a blacksmith's son, he'd have me killed. The king brought out the princess. She was indeed stunningly beautiful. She curtsied gracefully. "I am Princess Celestine. It is an honor to meet you, Lord Hexadorian." I carefully placed her on my back and flew back to the volcano. This time, even picky Lunaris said nothing, perhaps finally grown tired of the search. The king immediately announced to the world, whoever could rescue Princess Celestine from the legendary dragon Hexadorian would not only marry the most beautiful princess alive, but inherit the throne and all of Ashford Kingdom. The news spread across the continent like wildfire. Every prince, lord, and knight burned with excitement, especially after hearing about Celestine's beauty. If even the notoriously picky dragon had approved of her, she must be a rare treasure indeed. The publicity worked. Within days, my first challenger arrived, a knight on a white stallion wielding a rose-adorned lance. He was remarkably handsome. Celestine kept mouthing at me from behind. "Pick him, pick him." Unfortunately, I couldn't let anyone but Everett set foot in my lair. So I unceremoniously sent the White Knight flying into a forest several miles away with a flick of my tail. The second challenger was an enormous swordsman carrying a blade as tall as himself. He brought it down hard on my neck. Sparks flew where steel met scales, and then snap, the sword broke clean in two. I can't even remember what the third and fourth challengers looked like. None of them lasted more than 5 minutes. When single combat proved hopeless, heroes started forming parties, then armies. Some brought staggering numbers of soldiers. I defeated them all. To crush their spirits, I made sure to destroy every weapon and piece of armor they brought. At first, Celestine watched each battle eagerly, hoping for her destined dragon slayer. But as the failures piled up, she grew bored. She started complaining about the living conditions in my cave and threw frequent tantrums. Eventually, the old king had to take his daughter home temporarily, leaving Ivy to wear the princess's gown and veil as a stand-in. Because the dragon-slaying venture had dragged on so long, the king bought up all the land around the volcano and built a theme park. On one hand, challengers had to pay hefty fees for admission and could only use expensive park-supplied provisions. On the other hand, ordinary people could watch the spectacle from guaranteed safe viewing areas. The king's decision proved brilliant. Dragon Slayer Adventure Park became the continent's hottest tourist destination overnight. Ticket sales alone catapulted the king into the ranks of the world's wealthiest people, and Ashford Kingdom's economy doubled. Many who came to slay the dragon saw business opportunities instead. They struck deals with the king and built resorts on the outskirts, which gradually grew into a bustling town. They named it Dragonfall. The town's businesses all revolved around dragon slaying. Blacksmith shops, apothecaries, and several princess-themed entertainment clubs all thriving. Years passed. Things changed. But Everett never appeared. Everett, where are you? Wasn't becoming a dragon knight your dream? I've become the legendary evil dragon. I've found the most beautiful princess. Why won't you come? I desperately wanted to go back and check on him. I asked the king for time off, but he refused. Dear dragon, do you have any idea how much I lose every day you don't work? Can you afford to compensate me? But I couldn't focus on work. If I didn't know what had happened to Everett, everything I'd done felt pointless. I felt myself sinking into depression. My low spirits soon affected my body. My scales lost their hardness, my fire sputtered out, and I nearly died several times to challengers. Ivy and Lunaris grew deeply worried. The king had no choice but to grant me 1 day of paid leave, on the condition that Lunaris would fill in. I felt terrible about imposing. Don't worry, go and come back quickly. I may be old and not as strong as you, but I can still handle these challengers. Lunaris reassured me, and I hurried off. The village looked almost the same. The only difference was that the children had grown up, and the adults had grown old. I found the familiar blacksmith shop. The rhythmic clang of hammer on anvil and the whoosh of the bellows filled me with nostalgia. But it wasn't Everett who came out to greet me, it was his parents. They stared at my massive form, speechless. I'm Snort, do you remember me? Snort, wait, you're that pig who used to eat so much. You took good care of me back then. I came to find Everett. Everett left to slay the dragon. He set off ages ago. We don't know where he is. Ages ago, but I'd never seen him. Panic seized me. Had Everett gone after a different dragon? Or had my flames already reduced him to ash? Following the leads his parents gave me, I searched the world for him. I even checked the names of every challenger who had died facing me. They were all buried in the abbey outside Dragonfall. A cemetery plot there cost at least 3,000 sovereigns for 5 years' rent. It was outrageously expensive. Thankfully, Everett's name wasn't among them, though he might simply not have been able to afford it. Exhausted, I made my way into town. To avoid ambush by challengers, I used dragon magic to disguise myself as a human and wandered the streets to clear my head. Passing a blacksmith shop, I noticed a display of freshly forged weapons and armor on a cart outside. A sign read, Everett brand dragon slaying gear affordable quality. Dragon Slayer sword 100 sovereigns. Silver armor set 90 sovereigns. Styx water 80 sovereigns. Everett? As I stood there, mouth agape, my old friend rushed out of the shop and pitched me like any eager salesman. "Good sir, which piece catches your eye?" It really was Everett. Joy surged through me, but a knight shoved me aside and pointed at the gear. "Does this stuff actually work? It's not counterfeit, is it?" Everett snorted. He rolled up his sleeve and pointed to an old burn scar from smithing. "If it weren't for this gear, I'd have been dead long ago." The knight reached for his coin purse, but his companion stopped him. His gear cost less than a bottle of ointment in the park. If it actually worked, he'd be wearing it himself to slay the dragon. "Use your head." They walked off laughing. Watching the sale slip away, Everett couldn't hide his disappointment. I decided not to reveal myself just yet. I wanted to understand why he'd given up his dream. When Everett first heard the dragon had returned, he immediately set off with his carefully maintained gear. But when he saw the broken challengers stumbling out one after another, he began to hesitate. Dragon slaying isn't that simple. All those princes and knights teaming up still failed. I'm just a poor kid from the countryside. Why would fortune smile on me? He sighed. Fortunately, since the dragon destroyed everyone's equipment, Dragonfall had enormous demand for weapons and armor. And Everett's original trade was blacksmithing. He saw his opportunity. He sold his gear and used the money to open a shop. Before long, he met a princess at a tavern and got married. But good times didn't last. When the park's predatory rules faced backlash, the king was forced to compromise. Challengers could now bring their own weapons and armor, though they still had to buy park-supplied provisions. Everett's business plummeted. Why don't you put on your gear and try slaying the dragon? That was your lifelong dream. Give me a break. Gear costs money. Healing costs money. The entrance fee alone would bankrupt me. Look, if you're not buying, could you not block the customers? If I don't sell this stuff today, my wife's going to make me sleep in the yard. I told Lunaris everything I'd seen and heard. The old dragon let out a long sigh. This is humanity's tragedy. The moment they see the gap between dreams and reality, they surrender to reality, even when they're standing at the very threshold of their dreams. Then what was the point of becoming an evil dragon? I slumped to the ground, fighting back tears. Ivy stroked my scales, trying to comfort me. In this age, there are hardly any legends or fairy tales left, but you brought back the legend of dragons and heroes. For people living in this world, you are the last glimmer of dreams and miracles. Lunaris smiled something rare. Since you are a dragon, you must take responsibility. Let a hero come and defeat you. Nearly 5 years after the dragon Hexadorian kidnapped Princess Celestine of Ashford, he finally fell to a prince's blade. Before that prince, exactly 3,169 challengers had failed, every one of them a skilled warrior. Yet only this prince seemed blessed by fortune herself. He dodged the dragon's flames and claws, and drove his sword through scales as hard as obsidian. My boundless love for Princess Celestine moved the heavens themselves to protect me, the prince declared in his interview. Of course, a huge part of my success is thanks to this sword. The reporter's eyes lit up. Is that the legendary Dragonslayer sword? Indeed, forged by the master craftsman Everett himself, and incredibly affordable at just 500 sovereigns. Though the dragon Hexadorian was slain, Dragonfall didn't decline. Now people came to buy an authentic Dragon Slayer sword. Everett's business exploded. He even bought a factory to mass-produce the swords. Curiously, none of these Dragon Slayer swords had sharpened edges. People began to whisper, "A true masterpiece needs no edge. Only a blunt blade can slay a dragon." The real reason, of course, was that Everett simply didn't have time to sharpen all those steel bars. Besides, buyers had nowhere to use them anyway. The dragon-slaying story was over. As for the victorious prince, he'd been Celestine's childhood sweetheart all along, backed by enormous family wealth. To succeed at slaying the dragon, he'd offered 30 cities and 100 million gold coins as a dowry, and bought out the park's operating rights. The old king happily agreed. The day after their wedding, the prince sat down to write his memoirs, The Prince's Journey, The Art of Dragon Slaying, and 3 Years of Dragon Combat, Practice Problems and Solutions. But books don't write themselves, so Celestine continued shopping to pass the time. In the peaceful quiet of Obsidian Valley, Lunaris lounged contentedly in the bubbling lava, its favorite pastime. I kept scratching at a healing wound on my back. Thankfully, Everett's Dragon Slayer sword wasn't very well made and had only caused a splinter-sized injury. But sometimes, the itching was unbearable. For a dragon, reaching that spot is nearly impossible. I had to lie on my side and let Ivy climb onto my back to scratch it for me. Happy ending for everyone, wouldn't you say? I suppose. Ivy finally found the scab and scratched it. I groaned with relief. The dragon-slaying legend would live on through bards and storytellers. Everett was living happily, but having lost my purpose, I suddenly felt empty. For dragons, such long lives can sometimes be rather troublesome. Lunaris smiled. How do dragons usually pass the time? All sorts of ways. I take lava baths. Lunaris gestured to the molten pool. You're welcome to use it. I'm not taking baths every day. Well then, you could do what most dragons do. Take human form and travel the world on foot. Travel on foot as a human. That actually sounded pretty nice. Ivy, let's head out right now. The end.